Hey everyone, ready to dive into the future? Well, the future of drug development at least. We're talking personalized medicine, AI shaking up the regulatory world, and how about all those global harmonization efforts?
It's a lot to unpack.
It is, but we've got some great audio snippets to guide us, plus a whole pile of guidelines from the International Council for Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceuticals for Human Use.
Those are the folks trying to get everyone on the same page, huh? When it comes to drug regulations, I mean.
Exactly, like creating one big global rulebook.
A rule book for molecules and data, and patients, of course. It's all about making sure new medicines are safe and actually do what they're supposed to.
Right, no shortcuts there. But before we get too far ahead, remember that Day 2 FDA overview snippet. Think of the FDA like that friend who's not just helping you plan your road trip, but they're also checking in along the way, making sure you don't hit any unexpected detours.
That's post-market surveillance. They're always keeping an eye out, making sure the road is clear, ready to reroute you if there's a problem.
And that's where these trends we're talking about come in personalized medicine, AI, global harmonization. They could make that road trip even smoother, faster, maybe even more scenic. Who knows?
Well, personalized medicine, for one, is all about making sure you're getting the right treatment for you.
Tailoring it to your needs, like a custom-made suit, instead of something off the rack.
Exactly. No more one size fits all. What if doctors could use your genetic information to not only predict what diseases you might be prone to, but also figure out how you'll react to certain drugs?
Avoid those nasty side effects. I'm listening.
Exactly. You could even end up with entirely new drugs just for people with certain genetic profiles. But of course, it's not that simple.
No, I can imagine. I mean, analyzing someone's entire genetic makeup, figuring out how all that interacts with different medications.
It's a lot of data to sift through. We're talking complex tools and infrastructure that we're still building. Plus, of course, there's the whole issue of data privacy.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge one.
Yeah.
People need to know their information is safe and being used responsibly.
Couldn't agree more.
And speaking of data, that brings us to AI, right? It's everywhere these days, even in drug development.
It's about harnessing all that data we were just talking about. AI algorithms can analyze mountains of data from clinical trials, finding patterns and insights that we might miss.
So potentially speeding up the drug approval process, getting new treatments to patients faster.
That's the goal. But it's not about replacing human expertise, more like augmenting it.
Got it. So AI is a tool, not the decision maker. But how is it actually working in practice? Like, what are some concrete examples?
Well, think about how we identify new drug candidates. Used to be you'd have to test thousands of compounds, a super slow process. Now, AI can look at those molecular structures, analyze massive data sets, and predict which ones are most likely to work.
Like having a digital detective narrowing down the suspects.
Exactly. And they can even predict side effects based on a drug structure, which helps design safer trials.
Wow, so not just faster, but smarter drug development.
Exactly. But again, we got to be careful. Those algorithms are only as good as the data they're trained on.
So if the data is biased, the results will be biased. That could lead to some serious problems, even dangerous ones.
Exactly. So AI is incredibly powerful, but it has to be used responsibly and ethically. No question.
Okay, so we've got personalized medicine, tailoring treatments to each person, AI revolutionizing how drugs are developed and regulated. But there's a third trend that's often overlooked, global harmonization.
Ah, yes. Trying to make sense of the global patchwork of drug regulations. It's a challenge.
I can imagine. But it just seems so logical, right? Why not have countries work together, streamline things, make it easier to get new drugs to people all over the world?
It seems like a no-brainer, right? But the reality is, every country has its own set of rules, its own processes. Navigating all those differences, it's a headache for drug developers, and it can really slow things down.
Which means patients have to wait longer for new treatments.
Exactly, and it often drives up costs, too. It's a lose-lose situation.
So what's being done about it? Is anyone trying to make this whole system less, well, messy?
Well, there's the International Council for Harmonization, or ICH. They're doing a lot of good work trying to bring some order to this chaos.
And we've got a ton of their guidelines to look at, right?
Yes, we do. They've developed guidelines for everything from clinical trial design to data submission formats, even how to test for safety and quality. It's an attempt to create a more unified, more efficient global system.
A universal language for drug development.
In a way, yes. And hopefully that'll mean faster drug approvals, but also approvals that are based on solid science, good data.
Right. We don't want to sacrifice quality for speed.
Absolutely not.
Okay, so those guidelines are like a roadmap for global harmonization. But how are they actually being put into practice? Like, is anyone actually following them?
Well, it's a complex process, but there are some great examples. Take the ICH E10 guideline. It's all about choosing the right control group in clinical trials.
Control group, those are the people who don't get the experimental treatment, right?
Right.
To see if the drug actually works.
Exactly. And choosing the right control group, that's crucial for making sure your trial results are reliable. The E10 guideline helps researchers design trials that are consistent and rigorous.
So it's all about good science, making sure the data is solid.
Exactly. And there are plenty of other examples. The ICH E11, that focuses on clinical trials for children.
Ah, yes, making sure we're thinking about the specific needs of younger patients. Very important. What about guidelines for making sure the drugs themselves are high quality, that they're manufactured consistently?
Absolutely. There's the ICH Q1A guideline, all about stability testing.
So the drugs stay effective, even after they've been sitting on a shelf for a while.
Exactly. And there's the Q8 guideline, which encourages a science-based approach to drug development, really understanding the product and how it's made.
Building quality in from the start.
Right.
Okay, so these guidelines cover a lot of ground, which is great for companies trying to navigate all these different regulations.
Yeah, it is. And they're always being updated, refined as science advances, because things are always changing.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got personalized medicine, AI, global harmonization, all these forces shaping the future of drug development. But they don't exist in isolation, right?
Hmm.
How do they interact with each other? Are there potential conflicts, complexities we should be thinking about?
It's a great question. They absolutely interact, and it's where things get really interesting. Imagine AI analyzing huge genomic data sets, identifying genetic markers that predict how someone will respond to a drug. That's personalized medicine on steroids.
Wow, yeah.
And then think about global harmonization. If you can align those regulatory requirements, you can break down barriers to data sharing, which helps these new technologies like AI spread even faster.
So harmonization is a catalyst for progress.
Exactly. But they can clash too. Remember data privacy. Personalized medicine needs tons of data. AI needs tons of data. But we got to make sure that data is protected, used responsibly.
Right, it's a balance. Using data to drive innovation, but also protecting people's privacy.
Absolutely. And that's another area where global harmonization can play a role. Imagine if countries could agree on data privacy standards, make sure everyone's on the same page.
A global set of rules for the digital age.
Exactly. And this is just one example of how these trends can interact, sometimes in unexpected ways. As we move forward, we got to anticipate those interactions, think about the challenges, and figure out how to navigate them in a way that benefits everyone.
Okay, so we've got this complex dance between personalized medicine, AI, and global harmonization, all moving to the beat of scientific progress. But I'm curious, what does this all mean for the person sitting at home listening to this? The patient who might one day benefit from these advancements? How will these trends impact their experience with healthcare?
That's a great question, and that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
I'm ready when you are.
So we've talked about these big trends, personalized medicine, AI, global harmonization, but how are they actually changing the way new drugs are developed? What's happening on the ground in those labs and research facilities?
Yeah, let's zoom in a bit. What's different now than it was, say, 10 years ago?
Well, one big thing is this idea of quality by design, or QBD for short. Remember that day 10 snippet?
I think so, yeah. Wasn't that about building quality into the drug development process for the beginning?
Exactly. It's not just about checking for quality at the end. It's about baking it in every step of the way.
Like the difference between following a recipe carefully and just throwing a bunch of ingredients together and hoping for the best.
Exactly. With QBD, you're really understanding the science behind each step. You figure out those critical quality attributes, the specific things about the drug that really matter for it to work properly. And then you design your whole manufacturing process around making sure you hit those attributes every time.
So for a heart medication, that might be making sure the dosage is exact or how fast it gets absorbed into the bloodstream.
Exactly. And once you've identified those critical attributes, you can actually establish a design space.
Design space, that sounds kind of abstract.
Think of it like a map for your manufacturing process. It outlines the boundaries, like how much you can change certain factors without messing up the quality of the drug. Things like temperature, pH levels, the concentration of ingredients.
Okay, so as long as you stay within the lines on that map, you're good. kind of like guardrails for your manufacturing process.
Exactly. And that flexibility is really important these days, especially with all this innovation happening. Remember that day 10 analogy. QBD lets manufacturers make smart decisions about changing the process. They can figure out if a change will impact quality, safety, efficacy.
Like a navigation system that not only tells you how to get there, but also which detours are safe to take.
Precisely. And as AI gets more sophisticated, QBD is going to become even more powerful. You'll be able to model and predict those changes even more accurately.
So QPD is like the foundation for the future of drug development.
In a way, yes.
But as we push the boundaries, get more innovative, I can't help but wonder about the ethical side of things.
Mm.
Are we moving so fast that we're forgetting about potential risks?
It's a really important question. Ethics always has to be part of the conversation, especially as we're venturing into uncharted territory with things like personalized medicine and AI.
Right, remember those discussions from day 29, ethical considerations?
Exactly. There's a whole other layer of complexity there. Take personalized medicine, for example. Being able to tailor treatments based on your genes that raises questions about data privacy, who gets access to these therapies, even the possibility of discrimination.
Yeah, what if insurance companies start denying coverage because your genes say you're more likely to get sick? Or if only wealthy people can afford these personalized treatments?
Those are real concerns, and we need to address them head on. We need strong regulations, safeguards to make sure personalized medicine benefits everyone, not just a select few.
And what about AI? Those algorithms are only as good as the data they're trained on, right? So there's always the risk of bias creeping in, leading to wrong predictions or even harmful outcomes.
You're absolutely right. And that bias can have huge consequences. Imagine an AI system that's supposed to predict if a drug is safe, but it's trained on data that mostly comes from one specific group of people. The predictions might not be accurate for other populations.
So making sure that AI is trained on diverse data, data that represents everyone, that's crucial.
Absolutely. And we also need to be careful about how those algorithms are being used. We don't want them to make existing health disparities worse.
Okay, so lots of potential with personalized medicine and AI, but we got to be cautious, think about the ethical side of things.
Exactly. We can't just get swept up in the excitement and forget about the bigger picture.
And speaking of the bigger picture, those ethical considerations become even more complicated when you think about drug development on a global scale. Different cultures, different values, different approaches to healthcare.
You're absolutely right. It's not just about harmonizing regulations. It's about having a global conversation about these ethical issues, making sure everyone has a voice at the table.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential, the ethical challenges, but I think it's time to get down to brass tacks. Are there any actual examples of how personalized medicine and AI are already making a difference for patients?
There are, absolutely. Let's start with personalized medicine. One area where it's having a big impact is in cancer treatment. There are targeted therapies now that are designed specifically for patients whose tumors have certain genetic mutations.
So instead of using chemotherapy, which attacks all cells, healthy and cancerous, you can target just the cancer cells.
Exactly. That means the treatment is more effective and patients have fewer side effects.
Wow, that's a game changer. What about other areas?
Well, personalized medicine is also making a difference for people with rare diseases. In the past, it was really hard to develop drug for these conditions because the patient populations were so small. Drug development is expensive, so companies weren't willing to invest in therapies that would only help a limited number of people.
But with personalized medicine, you can identify subgroups of patients who share a common genetic basis for their rare disease, right? So even though the overall number of patients might be small, you can still have a group that could benefit from a targeted therapy.
Exactly. It's opened up new possibilities for drug development, giving hope to patients who might not have had any options before.
That's incredible. Okay, what about AI? Any real-world examples of how it's changing things?
Definitely. One area where AI is showing a lot of promise is in drug discovery. The traditional way of finding potential drug candidates, it's like searching for a needle in a haystack. You have to screen huge libraries of chemical compounds, and it takes forever.
I can imagine. But AI can speed up that process, right?
Exactly. AI can analyze huge data sets of molecular structures and predict which compounds are most likely to work. It's like having a digital detective helping you sort through the evidence.
So it's not just about speed, it's about making drug discovery smarter.
Precisely. And AI can also help us make existing drugs safer. There are AI systems now that can analyze data from clinical trials and predict the likelihood of side effects.
So before a drug even hits the market, you can start to get a sense of its safety profile.
Exactly. And that information can be used to design safer trials, inform drug labeling, even personalized treatment plans to minimize those risks.
Wow, so AI is bringing a whole new level of intelligence and efficiency to the drug development process. But let's not forget the human element, right? Especially when it comes to things like ethics, patient care, global collaboration.
Absolutely. Technology is a powerful tool, but it's not a replacement for human judgment and compassion.
Right. And speaking of global collaboration, we've talked about the ICH and their work on harmonizing guidelines, but are there other ways that countries are working together to move drug development forward?
Definitely. One big area is sharing data from clinical trials. In the past, that data was often siloed within companies or research institutions. It was like everyone was working on their own little piece of the puzzle without sharing their findings.
But now there's more recognition that sharing data can really speed up the process and lead to better treatments.
Exactly. Instead of everyone reinventing the wheel, they can build on each other's discoveries, avoid repeating mistakes.
Makes sense. Any specific examples of this happening on a global scale?
Absolutely. One great example is the International Severe Acute Respiratory and Emerging Infection Consortium, or ICERIC. They played a key role in collecting and sharing data on COVID-19 patients from all over the world.
That was a powerful example of what we can accomplish when we work together.
Absolutely. And that spirit of collaboration goes beyond just data sharing. We're also seeing more multinational clinical trials where patients from different countries are enrolled.
So instead of each country doing its own separate trial, you're pooling resources and expertise.
Exactly. That makes the trials more efficient, and it also helps ensure that the results are applicable to different populations.
Because a drug that works well in one group of people might not work as well in another. Diversity in clinical trials is so important.
Absolutely. And these multinational trials are especially important for developing drugs for diseases that are more common in certain parts of the world, like tropical diseases.
By doing trials in the regions where those diseases are most prevalent, you can really understand how the drugs will work for the people who need them most.
Exactly. And it often involves partnerships between researchers in developed and developing countries, which helps build capacity and expertise in those regions. It's a win-win for global health and scientific progress.
This is really inspiring. It's great to see how the global scientific community is working together to address these challenges.
It really is. And this collaboration is especially important as we move toward developing new and complex therapies, like gene therapy and cell therapy.
Those are therapies that involve actually modifying genes or cells to treat diseases, right?
Exactly. They hold incredible promise for treating all sorts of conditions, from genetic disorders to cancer, but they also come with unique regulatory challenges.
Because they're so new and complex, the traditional ways of regulating drugs might not be enough.
You're right. Regulators around the world are recognizing this and working together to develop new guidelines specifically for these therapies. They're trying to streamline the approval process while still making sure these treatments are safe and effective.
So it's about adapting the system to keep up with these incredible advances in medicine.
Exactly. And that's crucial if we want these potentially life-saving therapies to reach patients around the world.
It sounds like we're witnessing a major shift in how drugs are developed and regulated. More collaboration, more personalization, and a real embrace of new technologies like AI.
It's an exciting time to be in this field, that's for sure.
But I'm sure there are challenges too. What are some of the bumps in the road that we might face as we move forward?
Well, one big challenge is making sure that these advances benefit everyone, not just a select few. We've talked about health disparities, and we need to be careful that we don't make those disparities worse with these new technologies.
Right. Personalized medicine and AI should be accessible to everyone, no matter their income or where they live.
Absolutely, and that means addressing issues like affordability, infrastructure, and data bias.
And what about the speed of innovation? It seems like things are changing so fast.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that our regulations can keep up without sacrificing safety?
That's another big challenge, finding the right balance between fostering innovation and ensuring safety. We need to be proactive, anticipate risks, and adapt our regulatory systems as needed.
So it's not just about reacting to new developments, it's about being prepared for them.
Exactly. And that requires ongoing dialogue and collaboration between everyone involved, researchers, regulators, industry, and the public.
Okay, challenges noted, but let's talk about opportunities. What are some of the most exciting things happening in drug development right now? What should we be keeping an eye on?
Oh, there's so much to be excited about. One area that I'm particularly fascinated by is nanotechnology.
Nanotechnology. I've heard the term, but I'm not sure I really understand what it means in the context of medicine.
It basically involves manipulating materials at a really tiny scale, like the atomic and molecular level. You can create these tiny particles with unique properties that can be used for all sorts of medical applications.
So like tiny robots that can deliver drugs directly to cancer cells.
Exactly. Nanoparticles can be designed to target specific cells or tissues, carrying drugs or other therapies right where they're needed. It's a game changer for treating diseases like cancer because it means more targeted treatment with fewer side effects.
That's incredible. It sounds like science fiction.
It does, doesn't it? And there are other applications too. For example, nanoparticles can be used to create biosensors that can detect specific molecules in the body, which could help us diagnose diseases earlier.
So like a tiny sensor that could tell you if you have cancer cells before a tumor even forms.
Exactly. Early detection is so important for improving treatment outcomes. And this field is still pretty young, so we're just scratching the surface of what's possible.
Nanotechnology is definitely on my watch list now. What else are you excited about?
Another area that's generating a lot of buzz is gene editing.
Gene editing. That's about modifying genes to treat diseases, right?
Exactly. Technologies like CRISPR-Cas9 have revolutionized our ability to manipulate DNA. We can now edit genes with incredible precision.
So we're talking about literally rewriting the genetic code to cure diseases.
In a way, yes. And while gene editing is still in its early stages, there have already been some promising results in clinical trials, particularly for treating genetic diseases.
That's amazing, but I imagine there's some serious ethical questions to consider as well.
You're absolutely right. It's a powerful tool, but it also raises questions about things like human enhancement, designer babies, and the unintended consequences of altering our genes.
Those are big questions that we need to be talking about as a society. We need to make sure that this technology is used responsibly and ethically.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got nanotechnology, gene editing, two very different but equally fascinating frontiers in drug development. Anything else?
One more area I'm really excited about is immunotherapy.
Immunotherapy. That's about using the body's own immune system to fight disease, right? I've heard it's been really successful in treating certain cancers.
That's right. Instead of using drugs to directly attack cancer cells, immunotherapy helps the immune system do the job itself. It's like training your body's own defenses to be more effective.
So it's like giving your immune system a superpower.
Exactly. And it's not just for cancer. Researchers are exploring immunotherapy for all sorts of conditions, including autoimmune diseases, infectious diseases, even Alzheimer's disease. It has the potential to be a real game changer in healthcare.
Wow, it sounds like the future of drug development is full of possibilities. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by all this information, but also incredibly excited about what the future holds.
I know what you mean. It's a lot to take in, but it's also incredibly inspiring to see how quickly things are advancing.
But let's not forget the human side of all this. What does all this mean for the patients who will ultimately benefit from these advancements?
That's a great point. Let's bring the focus back to the patient experience and explore what they can expect in the future of healthcare.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, but it's time to bring it all home. What does this future of drug development actually look like for, the average person?
Well, imagine going to the doctor and they can actually use your genetic information to figure out what diseases you might be at risk for.
So instead of just general advice about diet and exercise, you get a personalized plan.
Exactly. And it goes beyond prevention, too. Think about treatments tailored to your specific biology.
No more worrying about whether a drug will work or if it'll have awful side effects.
Right. And what if we could diagnose diseases earlier than ever before? AI could analyze your scans, your blood work, pick up on subtle clues that humans might miss.
Catch things like cancer early on when they're much easier to treat.
Exactly. We're talking about shifting from reactive healthcare to proactive healthcare.
Okay, so instead of waiting until you're sick, you're constantly monitoring your health, making adjustments as needed.
Right. And AI could play a big role in that. Imagine wearable tech that tracks your vitals, apps that analyze your symptoms.
It's a lot of data, though. It makes me think about privacy, security. Who has access to all that information?
That's a valid concern, absolutely. As we use more technology to manage our health, we have to make sure that data is protected.
No one wants their health information floating around out there.
And that's where those global harmonization efforts come in. If we can agree on data privacy standards across borders, we can protect people while still allowing for innovation.
So it's a global issue, not just something each country figures out on its own.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're talking personalized prevention, targeted treatments, early detection, and it's all happening in this world of data and AI. But will everyone have access to these advances? Or is it just for the wealthy?
That's a million-dollar question, right? We have to make sure these benefits reach everyone, regardless of their income, where they live, their background.
Equity is key.
Absolutely. It's going to take collaboration. Governments, healthcare providers, researchers, industry, everyone needs to be on board.
So it's not just about developing new drugs, it's about building a system that's fair and accessible.
Right, because the goal isn't just to live longer, it's to live healthier, more fulfilling lives.
Well said. And, as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important to remember that the future isn't set in stone. It's something we're all creating.
Absolutely. Our choices, our actions, even our conversations about these topics, they all shape what the future will look like.
So stay curious, stay informed, stay engaged.
Couldn't agree more.
We've covered a lot today. Personalized medicine, AI, global harmonization, all these incredible advances on the horizon. But what I find most exciting is the human spirit driving all of this. Our drive to understand, to heal, to push the boundaries of what's possible. That's what's going to lead us to a future where disease is less prevalent, treatments are more effective, and everyone has the chance to live a longer, healthier, more fulfilling life. So keep those good questions coming. Keep exploring the world of science and medicine, and never underestimate the power of human ingenuity. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.